Hey y'all, it's Bookishrealm and I'm back with another video. So today I am here to do part 2 of a video that I've already shot before. So I can't remember how long ago it was, but I did a video of 2021 new releases that you need to read now. So this is part 2 because I have read some more 2021 new releases, and these are books that I have at least, I believe, rated 3 stars or higher. So I don't want to make this video too long, so we're going to go ahead and jump right in. The first book that I have on this list is For Your Own Good by Samantha Downing. Now this is an interesting book because I ended up giving this one, I think it's 3 stars on Goodreads, but I think I'm gonna end up rounding it up to 3.5. It is a very interesting story. I would not categorize this as a thriller. I think Mara from Books Like Whoa definitely said it best when she was like, this is very much so kind of like a suspense and very character driven. It focuses on a teacher who who is basically like a sociopath or a psychopath. Like, he's one of the two. He is so invested in his students, but in a very weird and creepy way, and it's for his own self-fulfillment. Now, what's so interesting about him pushing his students to the limit is that most of his students don't really care for him because his assignments are pretty much outrageous. He doesn't really like a lot of the students. He doesn't like their parents. It's interesting because part of it is from his perspective and part of it is from other characters' perspectives, and it is one of those books where people just start dying, and as a reader you know who's doing the killing, but you get to see it through their lens and the quote-unquote logic that they're using to justify what they're doing. And the ending was extremely fascinating. I would say that this is not a book where it is set up like a thriller where you're looking for that like dun 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 type of moment. It very much so is one that it's suspenseful. You're going to try to figure out like, okay, why is this individual doing this? What is their thought process? And it is absolutely bonkers. It is probably one of the craziest like suspense books that I've ever read, because when I finished it I was like, what did I just read? And then I think somebody had kind of reacted to what I said on Twitter, and they were like, is that a good or a bad thing? And for a minute I didn't know if it was a good or a bad thing. So if you're looking for more of like suspense mystery, I definitely would recommend checking out For Your Own Good by Samantha Downing. The next one that I have is A Room to Dream by Kelly Yang. This is the 3rd book in the Front Desk series, so I highly recommend reading the first 2 books, which are Front Desk and 3 Keys. This is the 3rd installment. I don't think, the way that this one ended, I don't think we're going to get another installment in the series, but this is one of my favorite middle grade series out there. Kelly Yang is easily one of my favorite authors. Anytime she puts anything out, I am instantaneously going to drop what I have going on and read it. And what I love about this series as a whole is that it tackles some very complex issues that are related to a lot of different topics, race being part of it. There's conversations about immigration, classism. This one tackled some stuff like colorism, the fact that major corporations often kill small businesses. So she often does make sure that she's highlighting some very important aspects of like current things that have are going on, or things that have happened in the past, and a lot of times she draws from her own personal experiences. So this one focuses on our same main character that we've seen in the other 2 books, but this one I think really delves into some of the issues that like Kelly Yang's specific community deals with. So Kelly Yang is Chinese, and it's interesting because the main character in this one goes to China after leaving China for an extended period of time. She goes back and she realizes that her own community has some serious issues, which I think is very interesting for Kelly Yang to have decided to highlight. It was fascinating to look at her tackle issues like colorism specifically, because I think in the first two books we saw a lot of discrimination that happened amongst like white people to other marginalized groups, and then in this book you see Kellyanne tackling like discrimination and racism that can be found within her own community. And it was interesting seeing colorism, particularly for me, from the perspective of a different community. So the Black community struggles a lot with colorism, and I know that it does exist in other communities, but I don't think I've read a particular text off the top of my head. I'm sure I have, but I think seeing it tackled in a middle grade book was really, really rewarding for me as a reader. Now, this one for me wasn't a 5-star read like the other two books in the series, because I do think that Kellyanne did tackle too many things at one time in this one. But I think the series as a whole, if you have not read the first two books, you need to read them so you can get to this 2021 release and just enjoy her as an author. She's just amazing. The next one on my list is Bad Fat Black Girl by Cecily Bowen. This is one of my favorite books of 2021, 5-star read, one of the best nonfiction books that I have ever freaking read, and one that definitely looks at how feminism, especially fourth wave feminism, leaves out women of color, particularly Black women and Black femmes. And what was so interesting about this is that this book takes a look at feminism through the lens of trap music. I cannot really explain to you what trap music is. I'm like, I know what trap music is, but I don't ever know how to explain what trap music is to another person. All I can tell you, it is a subgenre of hip hop, and it is very indicative of like trap lifestyle, which maybe I should like link something down below just in case you don't know what trap music is. And I grew up listening to trap music. I listened to trap music heavy when I was in college. I still listen to a lot of trap music now. And there are a lot of Black women who are now dominating trap music. And she takes those specific lyrics that have been developed by Black women, and she uses them kind of as the catalyst for this work. And she tackles so many different issues, from Black queerness to, I mean, just being a woman that is a woman, or a Black woman or Black femme who is plus size or fat. And just, it, to me, it's so amazing, because this is like a love letter to the hood. And the reason why I appreciated this so much, and it's something that she stated at the very end of the book, is that this book is not about self-actualization. It's not about a Black woman realizing and owning her Blackness and being confident and happy in her Blackness. This is for women and Black women and Black femmes who are already comfortable in their Blackness. They were raised to be comfortable in their Blackness. They never were put into situations where they've had to appeal to the white gaze, and they are often left out of the conversations, even when we talk about the intersectionality of being a Black woman or Black femme and how that specifically relates to feminism. They often are not a part of that conversation, because still to this day, and even within the Black community, there are people who want Black women and Black femmes who are from the hood to change themselves to become a more appropriate and more acceptable version of a Black woman or Black femme in society. Whether that's like, you know, the long nails, long eyelashes, lace front wigs, like all of that, like, people don't feel comfortable with. And she wrote this book to say that they should be accepted into the fold the way they are. They don't need to change who they are to make other people feel more comfortable. Now, I didn't necessarily grow up in the hood. There were a couple of moments in which I was in the hood, and I don't feel uncomfortable being in the hood, but I went through a process of self-actualization because I didn't always grow up in an environment where I was taught to be comfortable in my Blackness, or I wasn't taught that I had to do certain things to appeal to the white gaze. So to read this, where I have friends who have grown up in the hood or from the hood, this is a love letter to them, and it's something that I appreciate and really respect and admire Cecily Bowen for doing, because it's not many texts out there like that. Like, even I think with hood feminism, like I really enjoy Mickey Kendall's hood feminism, but I think that this is even more raw. There is use of the N-word, there is use of AAVE, and it's basically like, I'm not gonna write this to make you feel comfortable, whether you're black or white or whatever. This is who I am, this is where I'm from, and this is how we view feminism. And it was amazing. I can't wait to get my hands on a physical copy so I can reread it and annotate it. The next one that I'm gonna add to this list is The Hunting Wives by May Cobb. Now, I got this as a book of the month selection, and I ended up getting the audio for it because my library had it, and I did not really know what to think going into it. I knew that it was going to be a domestic thriller, and it was going to focus on this woman who ends up moving to this small town. She gets obsessed with this other woman. They have this group amongst them, they call themselves the Hunting Wives, where they go out in an open area and they shoot, and then there's a teenager who ends up dead in the process. So once again, what's so interesting is I've been exploring more of like domestic thrillers and mysteries. That has not necessarily been a genre that I have always been 100% confident in. If you all know me, I'm more of like a contemporary literary fiction, you know, those hard-hitting type of books, realistic fiction type of reader. So I'm branching myself out, and a lot of that has to do with, I think, some of the work that I'm doing and kind of, you know, pushing the boundaries of my own comfort zones. So I am finding some very interesting like themes amongst some of these books, where you will have a book like this sometimes where no one is likable. So I will preface this by saying, like, if you want to pick up The Hunting Wives, nobody in this book is redeemable. And I think it's important to know that going in, because I think that sometimes people are reading this book with certain expectations of characters being redeemable, and unfortunately they're not. Like, nobody is redeemable. Everyone is horrible in this book, and especially our main character, as she kind of gets tied up into this other woman who she becomes kind of obsessed with, to be honest with you. And there are some steamy aspects to it that I didn't typically expect coming from a domestic thriller, and it was crazy the way it turned out. I was sitting at my desk early in the morning, because I usually get to work pretty early, when, you know, before a lot of people are even there, and somebody was speaking to me, and I was so zoned in to figuring out or listening to like the reveal of who ended up killing this teenage girl, and I just never saw it coming. So they're not the greatest wives on earth. They all have these dirty little secrets, and you kind of get to watch the main character kind of stumble and fall and spiral out of control, where she's used to being a stay-at-home mom, and she's used to, and I wouldn't even say catering to her husband, because her husband is really supportive. He's just a really nice guy, but she starts to lose focus of her husband, her son, just her family life, her goals, because she becomes so wrapped up in this woman who has some severe insecurities of her own, insecurities in her marriage. It's a hot mess, and there are so many different elements to this book, and like who lives and who dies, and so it's pretty crazy, but it is one that I did enjoy. And I think that if most people go in thinking about the fact that, okay, I know that no one's going to have redeemable qualities, I think it makes the book a lot more enjoyable. The next one that I'm going to recommend is Sugartown Queens, and this is one that I talked about in my September wrap-up, which was extremely late, but I'll link it in the card symbol above for you to check out. I really enjoyed Sugartown Queens. It is a story about a biracial girl living in South Africa who is struggling with trying to figure out her family dynamics. She lives with her white mother, kind of in, I forget the technical term for it, but the way it's kind of like a shanty town, I think is the correct term for it. And there's clearly some gray area of like who her mother's like family is, and she doesn't really know much about her dad. Her dad is clearly like not in the picture at all, so she ends up connecting with her mother's mother, and then we kind of figure out what happened to where her mother is isolated from the rest of her family. This definitely delves a lot into racism as it looks in South Africa post Nelson. I think this is post Nelson Mandela's death. I keep like getting it confused because I'm like, I think because he's mentioned quite a few times, and I can't specifically remember if it's post his imprisonment, but I can't remember if it's post his death. But you get to see the remnants of apartheid and the the heavy racism that exists. And as I said kind of in my wrap up, one of the things that I heavily enjoyed about Sugartown Queens is that it looks at that complex dynamic of being like a biracial individual where you don't feel like you fit into either group. Like in her case, she doesn't feel black enough, and she also knows that she's not white enough to be accepted. So it's kind of this in between that she's stuck in, and she's trying to figure out her own identity. And also seeing these conversations about racism that is beyond the United States is also intriguing, because I think that when we think racism, and now because of a lot of conversations that have been happening since last year, and rightfully so, racism is often, you know, heavily tied to the United States because it's had so many deep-rooted issues, but racism exists everywhere. And so it was very interesting to see racism and discrimination through the lens of someone that is living in South Africa. So there are some racial slurs that do appear in this book that are native to South Africa, which if you have any knowledge of that, you know exactly what word I'm talking about, which is the direct equivalent to the N-word. And it is used openly in the book by white individuals towards black individuals in the book. But it's not a long book. I think it's just a little over 250 pages, but it does such a great job of just storytelling and really laying out the foundation of the main character's family and how she feels trying to navigate all this, because she also is the stronger person out of her and her mother. So her mother is a kind person, but our main character is stronger, so she ends up carrying a lot of the burden that maybe she shouldn't necessarily carry as a child. But you know, sometimes that comes with the territory. But if you did not hear me talk about Sugartown Queens, or if you haven't heard about Sugartown Queens, that definitely is a 2021 release that you need to look into. The next one that I have is Off the Record. Now, Off the Record was really intriguing for me because I had not read Cameron Garrett's other book, which was Full Disclosure. I had been meaning to read it when it first came out, but I just never got the opportunity to actually end up picking it up. So it was kind of, I don't know why I was like, I'm just gonna read Off the Record first, like whatever, I'll get back to Full Disclosure. But Full Disclosure was a good one for me because it is a very interesting look into journalism, the entertainment industry, and how all of that works within the framework of the Me Too movement. And she explores a lot of different things. Cameron Garrett explores a lot of different things related to body image or body size and sexual identity. And she also delves a little bit into how sexual assault is not just something that impacts women, although it predominantly impacts women. There are men who also face sexual assault, and you kind of get to see how that impacts a male character in this book. So I did find it really, really hard to read in some parts because it very much so is something that is still occurring to this day. You see the negative impacts that it has on the women that have been affected by this. There are some discussions about even how race is tied to the entertainment industry and how it is probably even more difficult for those women who are women of color to come out and talk about their experiences because of the fact that already breaking into the industry is hard, and then to accuse someone who is, you know, very well known, has a very established career of sexual assault, kind of puts you on the chopping block. And I think that Cameron Garrett handled all these topics with such grace and care, and it was a quick, fast-paced read, and I'm glad that it was set against the backdrop of journalism, which then set us into the world of the entertainment, like movie industry. I think there's a lot to be said about that, but it was just a phenomenal read. I know that a few people have read Full Disclosure and really enjoyed it, so if you've read Full Disclosure, I definitely would say go ahead and give Off the Record a try as well. The next one that I'm going to recommend is a pho love story. Now, this one I don't know what I expected of this one. I feel like I went into this one just thinking that it was going to be a Romeo and Juliet retelling, which it is a Romeo and Juliet retelling. You know, you have two main characters who have families who have opposing restaurants, and they're both told like not to associate with each other, and they don't know why they're not allowed to associate with the other person from the other family. They just know that it's kind of a forbidden thing, and it's kind of an unspoken rule that they're not to communicate with opposite families. And this is one of the first YA books I think that I've really read, because I've read a middle grade book that focuses on the Vietnamese experience, particularly the Vietnamese American experience, but this is the first time that I think I really delved into like a YA book that really honed in on the Vietnamese and Vietnamese American experience. And that's probably what drove the book home for me, not so much the Romeo and Juliet retelling aspect of it and the romance that comes from it, because at its core it is very much so a YA contemporary book, but there is a very, very intricate exploration of Vietnam, the Vietnam War, how it impacted Vietnamese community, and what happened when the individuals who were able to leave Vietnam, what happened to them when they came to the United States, and how it impacted them and changed them to their very core. So I do not have as much background knowledge of that, so to get that against the backdrop of a Romeo and Juliet retelling made the story more dynamic, in my opinion. I think that quite often we get a lot of retellings that I feel like sometimes don't really have a lot of like meat to them. I don't want to say substance, because I don't think substance is the right word, but I often look for my contemporary books to be just a tad bit more impactful, not necessarily about trauma, but I really like them to explore some interesting and compelling themes, and that's exactly what this book did. It was so well done, and I think that if you do get the opportunity to read this one, don't go in just thinking that, oh, this is just another YA contemporary that's going to be like a Romeo and Juliet retelling. It is so much more than that at its core, so that's why I ended up appreciating this, and I would have never known that from just looking at the cover or reading the description of the book. The next one that I have is a middle grade graphic novel, and it is Allergic. I had heard a lot about Allergic just from library reviews, like library journal reviews of Allergic, and it was getting a lot of praise. And I do like middle grade graphic novels. They often tackle, if you can't see a theme here, I love books that tackle tough issues, but Allergic does tackle some pretty tough topics as it relates to a middle grade audience. And it may not seem like a tough topic on the surface, but it is when you've experienced what it's like to be allergic to freaking everything as a kid. And it's a really tough experience. I don't think people realize how tough that is, because you don't feel normal all the time. You don't feel like a part of the group, because there are kids who can have pets, kids who can eat anything that they want, and sometimes having allergies like that severe can be very isolating. I know for me, I had eczema really, really bad when I was a kid, and it would flare up, especially like during the spring and the summer, during the warm months. And you know, I've had experiences where I've eaten fruit and my entire face is swollen. I've broke out and hives all over my body, and it's like a very isolating experience because everybody's not going through that. And at that age developmentally, you know, kids are like, that's weird, like what's wrong with you, not knowing that it's something that, you know, your body literally can't help. Like there's nothing that you can do about it. So watching this young girl have to navigate what it's like to have severe allergies like that, and you know, also trying to make friends and realizing that her allergies are impacting her friendships and how she can move amongst friends, what she can and can't do with friends. It's a great resource for kids who are experiencing that now. I think that, you know, if other books don't come out within, you know, due time, that this is definitely going to be a resource that I use for my daughter who has really severe allergies. We actually are on the verge now of like considering going to an allergist because I don't know what she's allergic to, but she gets eczema really bad, like on her face, and the medicine that she has to use actually is not 100% good for the skin because it's so strong that it does end up like burning the skin, and the skin comes off, and then the face is raw and stuff like that, and it blotches the skin. Like I have blotches on my arms and stuff from the time that I had to use the same medication. So I think that this is just an invaluable resource that did not exist before, and I wish something like this would have existed when I was younger, but I'm glad that my daughter is going to have access to something like this. And while it may not seem like it's a huge deal, it definitely is a huge deal for a lot of kids who do suffer from pretty bad allergies. So if you haven't read Allergic and you're interested in graphic novels, particularly middle grade graphic novels, I definitely would say that's the book for you to check out. And the last one that I have on this list is White Smoke by Tiffany D. Jackson, which is a book that I think most people are reading right now. So I'm not surprised if most of you are all like, oh, okay, well, I'm already familiar with this one. I know this one, which, because I know that I have been talking this book up for a while. White Smoke is a thriller, but also has some kind of like horror elements to it as well. It definitely has like The Haunting of Hill House meets Get Out. I think whoever wrote that blurb was 100% accurate in the way that they wrote that, because it definitely has those vibes. I think that this is one of those books that really showcases how good Tiffany D. Jackson is with her writing and just creating certain atmospheres. I know I just read her book Monday's Not Coming, and the writing in that was absolutely beautiful. I think the writing in this too is really good, but in a different way. That this book is creepy. I really did genuinely like have to refrain from reading the book at night because it was just scaring me a little too much for my liking. So if you're into books like that give you that creepy, weird vibe where you don't really know what's going on, there's a little bit of body horror in this one. There's some commentary on race in this. It's just a phenomenal book. I know that a lot of people are not a fan of the ending, and I get it, because the ending is just a tad bit rushed and the loose ends of it are not necessarily tied up. But I think as a whole it was a good read. It is not my favorite book by her, but as far as like 2021 releases, it is definitely one that you want to get your hands on. All right, y'all, so those are some 2021 new releases that I think you should check out. If you have any 2021 new releases that I have not read that you think I should check out, make sure you leave them in the comment box below. As always, make sure you give this video a thumbs up, hit the bell for notification. If you're looking for ways to support this channel, links will be down in the description box below. If you're looking for ways to follow me on social media, the links will be down in the description box below as well. And I will be back with another video soon.